Hello and welcome to a new episode of the CTO Show with Mehmet. My name is Mehmet, and as you know, in each episode, I discuss different topics from emerging technologies, digital transformation, uh, no code, AI, and a mix of everything in between. And sometimes, as you are aware by now and you are familiar, that sometimes I also have guests who are subject matter experts and they are pioneers in what they do. And today I'm very pleased to have with me Ken Lonyai, who is joining me today. He is an expert in UX CX. So I will leave the introduction as usual to the guest. Ken, thank you for being on the show today. Can you just introduce yourself and a little bit more about what you do?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Mehmet. I'm happy to be here. I love your show. Uh,
Thank you.
I I can, I guess, excuse me, give you a quick rundown. In the simplest terms, I'm a product geek, product manager, product director, designer, whatever title, that's what I do. UX is absolutely a part of that. Um, so I'll try to give you just a quick background. My undergrad was in manufacturing. So after college, I worked as an engineer on the production aspect of product. And later I had my own small manufacturing business, which made me responsible for the extent of product duties. After grad school, I was founding partner of an internet agency that in time morphed into other things like software applications, interactive touchscreen kiosks. We had our own product line, so I was responsible for that. And as you said, I have the other side, which is UX, which I'm proud to say was recognized when our agency won a UX award. Also, for 5 years, I co-managed a meetup group in New York with Deb Benkler called HUI Central. So HUI is an acronym I coined for human user interface, things like gesture, eye tracking, facial recognition, voice recognition, TTS, STT, haptics, etc. Essentially everything that makes a computer's UI more human-like. And the other big focus was AI. And we even ran the first ever official Watson hackathon for IBM. And that meetup was the biggest of its kind on the planet. And at that time, our company also undertook a 2 year odyssey to build a personal intelligent assistant called Eliza. Then when we were ready to get funding, this thing called Alexa came out, making it nearly impossible. So
Yeah.
since then, I've had various product roles in multiple verticals for huge enterprises and smaller companies. And presently, I'm a consultant, not limited to, but focused on a range of AI and conversation intelligence and dedicated to helping companies improve both their product and profits through my philosophies, which, if you want, we can get into, called the UX profitability continuum and product. And uh, I also will be having podcasts, two podcast series, one on AI and one on product, launching soon. But I'm here for you today, so let's talk about whatever you're focused on.
Thank you, Ken. And that's a very rich and I liked also the combination of AI with the UX CX, and we will try to cover these topics today. So the first question, based on some of the aspect that I saw, it's good to follow a certain flow today. Like you've been advising retail brand executives, um, around UX and CX. So UX is for people who are not familiar with that. So UX is the user experience, CX is the customer experience. So what do you believe are the most critical aspects of UX CX initiatives that contribute to a company's bottom line?
Yeah, that's going to go right into my thing. I'll keep it very brief, but what I call the UX profitability continuum. I have called it the CX profitability continuum, and UX and CX are mostly the same thing. So it's always putting the customer first. It's user-centered design. And what I say through that philosophy is that when you do that, the profits will follow. If you take the shortcuts I outlined to try and cheat on profits, the UX is going to drop and fail and the profits will follow. But it really just, it's always, and to me, it's so simple. I don't understand why companies fail. You just need to think what benefits the customer. That's what differentiates one business from another, even if that is as simple as price. But usually selling on price only doesn't work in the long term. So it's taking these kind of standard UX approaches. Like I said, user-centered design is or design thinking, different terms, and just saying we offer X, what would make X better for our customers, and not just guessing at it. Many processes to do the research and find out from them what that is. The legend is Steve Jobs just knew. Apple's always done testing. They don't guess either.
Yeah, that's a a good example, actually. Um, while also preparing for today's episode, Ken, one of the things that, you know, I figured that you sometimes talk about is the concept of humanized user experience, HUI.
Mhm.
So, how this is different from the traditional UX CX approaches?
Well, they're not necessarily different. They're complementary, I would say. So what's finally really beginning to change, at least in some areas, is the type UI we have. So if you go back to when I first learned about computers, I wasn't even involved in them. There were terminals. And people would be kids in high school would be typing on these terminals. That looked so horrific. I had no interest in these things. Never imagined I'd be doing this today because you have to type stuff and wait for a response. It was all in a language typically. Now we have these very advanced voice UIs, and there's other parts too. As I said, when we had HUI Central, haptics, touch feedback. If you touch a phone, it's like touching a window, a piece of glass. There's nothing to learn there. Phones have little haptic generators. You get some vibration, but it's not like we had speakers that brought in things. You would touch glass or they'd have a stylus and it felt like you were dragging it across concrete or fabric. So there's still ways to go to make things more humanized. And that's part of the user experience that if I had to sit at a terminal now to do the things that I do, I would not be doing this because I couldn't stand that. But as it gets more humanized, the whole user experience is I'm not thinking of I'm talking to a machine or interacting or I'm just being myself. The thing I always point out is for nearly every human, on the day you're born, you begin to communicate and you do that by call it voice, it's sound. You're using your mouth. You don't know words or anything. That is the most natural way we communicate. We start using our eyes and things like that. So the machines are beginning to catch up, and that's where the UX will greatly improve. And then there's all these other aspects of things that are going on now. But so they're complementary.
Okay. Now, you talked about, of course, why companies should focus on, you know, the customer experience because it's the one that will lead to increase their revenues. But what are the most effective, I would say, user-facing technologies that they should consider to enhance their customer experience? What are they missing today? Like if someone is complaining that okay, I've tried to do whatever possible, but I'm still not um, getting the best customer experience. So what could be the thing that they are missing out?
I'm not sure that it's a technology per se, like saying, oh, you need a voice UI can help. I really think it's their relationship to the customer. Again, it's this user-centered design thinking types of things, getting feedback. So uh, companies kind of get ideas and go with it, ask some questions. How well that's researched and how well feedback comes organically, I think are the biggest things. So a company that has salespeople, they are constantly in tune. They know what's selling, what's not selling, where the complaints are, why competitors beat them to the sale. That feedback, and then acting on it in a proper way is probably more important than the technology you can come up with. I mean, so the whole products thing that, is innovation. I'm all for that. And customers will not necessarily tell you the innovation they're looking for. There's a meme that's apparently not true that claims Henry Ford uh, said if he asked a bunch of people what they would want, they'd say a faster horse, and he had to come up with the idea of the car. I mean, that's just a meme. It's not true.
Yeah.
If you say, "Oh, you know, tell me what kind of software you want," you might not get the right thing. So it's using some evaluation techniques based on that feedback, and then there's nothing wrong with looking to technologies. Technology might exist, might not exist. I'm never technology for technology's sake, but I'm usually the person pushing newer technologies. So, and of course, it's going to depend on the business. If we're manufacturing steel, just the material steel, there's not too much we could do in terms of what we would think about software technology to help customers, except maybe in the way they're buying things. So everything is individualized, but it's really understanding the customer and the market as well, because customers may have a need for something, but the market just can't go that way. Like if you look at batteries for electric cars right now, I don't know what the true desire is amongst people for electric cars. There's all kinds of conversation. There is a finite source of uh, the battery materials right now, so the market drives it as much as whatever needs or wants there might be from customers.
Okay. Now, this is, great insight. Now, little bit shifting gears and from the UX and CX perspective, to something that I know that you're also like into it, which is like being responsible for product. Um, so being a product manager, um, some people they see it some like it's a I would say something mysterious, right? So, uh, what does a product manager does? Okay, is he a coder? No, we know this not necessarily. He could be from a programming perspective. Like, is he a sales guy? No, but he should understand how to talk to customers. So, if someone asks you, Ken, like what is the role of a product manager? And excuse me, because I'm asking, maybe it's a very simple question, but for someone from the audience who might, like be wondering, okay, what is this product manager? And I'm asking this question also because there might be some people who are listening to the show and they are planning to have uh, something to be built. So the importance also of the product manager for any startup or any company that produce software in general?
Yeah, no, it's a great question because I think it is unknown. I'll give you a couple answers, try and be brief. So when I was a kid, kids wanted to be doctors, nurses, lawyers, firemen, whatever. One kid said, "Oh, I want to be a product manager."
Really?
They're in this, maybe today there's more programs and paths. Any of us have been doing it for a little while. There's been no clear way to get here. So a product manager, the way I describe it, a couple descriptions, but if you think of a wagon wheel from an old wagon from the 1800s, spoked wheel, product manager is the hub that attaches that wheel to the wagon and all the spokes connect to the hub. So the role is to coordinate all these aspects that go into a product. So you have engineering, you have marketing, you have sales, and on and on. There's, 8, 10, 12 things. And you have to be willing to be the responsible party at the center to make these things all happen. Each area of the organization has their own interests, their own way of operating, their own needs. They see what they do, how it impacts product from their perspective. But the product manager is really the quarterback that pulls us together, has the vision and the plans and the roadmap, has to sell it upwards into upper management. So it being the hub, I also say, so larger companies have multiple product managers. Each one owns their own island. They are make the rules. It is their island. No one can step foot on that island without permission. In a properly working company, when people step on your island without permission, that's when things start to fall apart. So you are a leader. It's like your own small business that you run and manage all these aspects for a product or a group of products, and have to take on that responsibility of coordinating and using all your skills, technical skills, human relationship skills, and be in this constant state of flux to make these things happen, to get a product out the door. It, from idea to delivery of a product people value, there's a lot in there, and that's the person that, for the most part, coordinates it.
And I think, Ken, because I've interacted myself in previous lives with product managers, and I think one of the um, important things a product manager should do is also to get the feedback from the field and try to keep enhancing the product, right?
Absolutely, and that's where. So, for example, I mentioned sales. It's bi-directional. I always think, like, if I'm working with a company that is doing sales through a sales team versus, say, an e-commerce site, there's no interaction with the person generally. That salesperson is my customer, because if I give them something to sell and they're successful, that means I'm delivering the right product. Should also be thinking of the end user, but it's a little twisted maybe from what you're supposed to think as a product manager. If my salespeople are happy because they could sell the products I'm responsible for, I know I'm doing something right. So yes, the sales channel feedback, absolutely important.
Great. I want to again shift gears, and I know this is a topic that yourself you've been doing it, and you explained it at the beginning of the show today, and everyone talking about today. It's AI, right? So
Mhm.
uh, because you've been responsible and building products, AI powered products for quite some time. At first, how did you see the change happen from time that you started to work on AI related projects and where we are now? How this evolution happened? And my next question would be, where are we going?
Mhm. Yeah, great questions. So I've been doing this for a while, but AI really goes back decades, and it's been a very slow evolution that all of a sudden is accelerating. So it's probably been accelerating bit by bit, but it hasn't gotten momentum until recently to really seem like something. And this is putting aside the movies. With all the stuff you see in movies, has been nowhere near realistic in many ways. When I started doing this, it was so. Let me just step back and say one thing. I break up AI into two things: the visible and the invisible. So invisible has been going on quite long. So if you think of banking, they use, quote, invisible AI for fraud detection. That goes on. Everyone's being
Yeah,
touched by AI every day, and they don't even know it, because the banks are trying to protect themselves and they employ it. I think what you're referring to is more on the visible side. You have
right.
ChatGPT, which really has only been, we'll call it, sort of a public thing since February, has really caused this stir. Everyone's talking about it. A neighbor who doesn't know what he's saying talked about it to me. The things I've done, it's been a much more challenging build. So I mentioned before Eliza, we were building that a number of years ago based on NLU, natural language understanding. That's when, like now, if I'm speaking words and a system is listening to it, it has to take the sounds, convert that into words, which is natural language processing, and then understand the meaning behind those words. So there's been a process, very manual training process, usually train towards a particular vertical you're in. So, for example, I worked at one of the largest banks for their chatbot. and everything had to be trained as, for example, I want to transfer money. And what does that mean? And then, well, what do the words mean, but what is the intent and how do you transfer money? So some amount of money comes from one place, goes to another place on a particular date. So there's four things to know. The system has to query. Each part of that has to be trained, and there's lots of ways to make those statements. So it has to be trained in all these variables. So it was a very manual thing. There's trainers and there's a bunch of people to make that happen, conversational designers, etc. So now recently we hear this explosion of ChatGPT is just one of them. It's the one that grabs the headline. There's a number of them. They are large language model transformer models, which means that they're not cognizant the way we think of being cognizant or the way they seem they are, because you can ask them things and they reply because they are trained on language. They are looking for patterns and they reply patterns. That's why all this silly stuff about people making videos about the machines saying, we're going to destroy humanity, we're going to kill you. And especially love when I've seen the transcripts. Chat GPT says we. Right, who's the we? Is Chat GPT hanging out with Siri on the weekends and they're plotting to take over? It's we. So it tells you, that's a big clue there that this is just, you looked at a lot of language, you ask a certain way, it responds a certain way, has no clue what it's saying. So as far as where it's going, yeah, it's going to change in the future. It's going to get more and more cognizant. But from a practical standpoint, the two things I'll point out, there's a huge trap in thinking it's more than it is right now. It has some great use cases, but it's not everything. And especially you hear all these examples of, oh, you can ask it to write your marketing. All right, it's a large language model trained on generic or however you want to phrase it, generic or vast sums of content, a corpus of the internet or part of it. And how is my product, a very specific product, going to be differentiated by this thing that's looking at everything there? So that's a huge fall. I see so many people being advised to fall in and probably falling into. So where it's going is using this in a much more intelligent way, focused on your own data, and it will be able to learn more and begin to understand more. I'm not writing algorithms, so I can't say exactly where that's at, but it definitely is not going away. This whole pause thing is such a joke, PR stunt. There's no way to pause it. The milk is spilt. It's how to best deal with the risks, and the risks, if you want to get into that or not, the risks I don't really believe come from the AI. It comes from the human manipulation or carelessness of the AI.
Here I put my comments that I hope that the followers of the show will not be bored, but because I keep repeating the same thing what you said, Karen, is as you explained, it's a large language model. It follows what you put inside it. So whatever you put as input, of course, it will do something and then it will generate the output for you. It's always dependent on us. It doesn't have any consciousness, let's call it. It has to follow. It's a software, guys. Like it's just like any other piece of software, any program. It needs input to provide output, and without the input, it's just sitting there. It doesn't have a soul, and as you said, Ken, it will not come up and becomes a zombie and kill us, of course. And that's not the case. But I'm interested, like for example, because like I talked a lot about this on the show, and there are mixed opinions. But the thing that I always try to do is to, again, focus on the positive sides. So you've been in product management and UX, right? So how do you see AI might, add to product management and user experience and customer experience in general? Where you can see it adding value?
Well, jobs are changing for sure based on this. And the best value to get out of it is doing the things that are tedious, that are repeatable, simplistic in some sense, that people don't necessarily want to do. So any type of lookup. So my example from banking of transferring money, it was probably a revelation. I have no idea when. Call it the 1970s, but I don't know that you could call a bank and maybe talk to a person and transfer money over the phone. I don't know when that started versus having to literally drive or take the bus down to the bank and do these things. So now the next convenience is not even having to do that during business hours, having this system that you can just say, hey, I want to transfer money. That started with online banking, but you couldn't talk to, fill out a bunch of fields and things like that, log in. So now the fact that I can probably be identified by voice, but never getting into spoofing concerns and things. I can just talk to the thing and say, hey, send Bob, my friend. Wouldn't even have to identify Bob necessarily as my friend. Send Bob $100. Those kinds of simple conveniences are a great use of AI because it can factor in a lot of things like the authentication, knowing who Bob is, knowing where I'm transferring money from, or asking me, is that from your checking or your saving? Oh yeah, I forgot to
Hmm.
tell you. So doing those types of things, it is a great use. Whether it can predict a direction I should take my product in the future, I think it's definitely going to be more useful for those things. Today, it's not there. So a lot of it is just on the automation side. Those things can be done today. And there's always the talk that humans will move to a more creative thing. That's a very loaded concept. I don't think it's as easy as that. But the AI is here. There's not too much difference from what I said, a web page to do these things and AI. If you look at it from the jobs perspective of, well, when enough people are using a website, we need less human support people. It's the same kind of issue. So that's the whole thing to unpack separately. But these types of tasks don't take true understanding. So again, when I worked at the bank, if you talked to the chatbot and said fraud or stolen credit card, it would immediately go to a human because we could not trust that the bot would fully understand all the nuances of what that could mean and the questions. Things have advanced. I don't think it's there today either that you can rely on that. And that's a heavily regulated industry. So it's a balance between finding these types of repeatable tasks can be done and it can be proactive. That's a big thing that you still don't really see that I've been saying for years. These things can be proactive. They can learn you. If you respect someone's privacy, in my little example there, I forgot to tell it checking or saving. So it can say, is that from your savings like you usually do? So it's sort of proactive or other things, reminders. The whole Alexa, what's the word I want to say? We'll call it landscape. I forget the name of their little apps people build. That's sort of to make up for all the shortcomings of things Alexa doesn't do, whether that was intentional or they just need to get a platform out. A whole other debate. Yeah. But there's a lot of room for proactivity and especially if it's an ongoing tool someone's using. If I was using Photoshop and it had a VUI, a voice UI, and it understood my style of retouching things. We're not talking about generative images now, but it can ask me questions. Do you want me to do this? Do you want to use your palette? I see no problem with that. And that's very underutilized. I think that's a great area people should be exploring with these technologies is give it some proactivity in a non-invasive way. And there's a lot of room.
I 100% agree with you, Ken, on this. And I will give you just an example. Hmm. Uh, so the way people are start to use, and still they are using ChatGPT is it's just the lazy way. And so go write me a marketing content, as you said, or write me an email. Now, personally, because I've been an extensive user, I can say. So of course, with time, I started to learn how to use this. Like, yeah, at the beginning, I was doing the same, write me email, do this, do that. But the moment I figured out that I can utilize it like a um, assistant, let's say, where I enter. Of course, it doesn't bring new ideas. We know this. It's rely on whatever data. But the moment I started to use it in a more, I would say, conversational way, more than an ordering way, I start to get better results. And then I start to see some projects, like maybe some of them you're aware about, and I'm sure because I covered that in previous episodes, like for example, Auto GPT and Baby AGI, and the people who are trying to get AI um, do task oriented stuff. So it's like you are the chef, you give the recipe, and then you have someone to cut the vegetables, someone to prepare the plate, someone to
Right.
do that. And then you end up by having, the recipe cooked by the AI, but actually the recipe was done by the chef who's a human here. So I think, this is where it's my own opinion on that matter. This is where AI will add a lot of value. So, and I believe also because I had a guest also a couple of weeks back, and we were discussing about the need that we should keep also generating original content, because if we don't come up with new content, what would happen in the future? So, so this, I would say, creativity and coming out with something unique and original, we always need it. And yeah, I agree with you 100% on this. Now, before we come to a close, Kat, like just again, staying in the AI landscape, um, how do you see it um, in intersection with, for example, because we talked about a little bit, how we can use it inside banks and so on, but from a customer experience perspective, or like to give more value to the end user, how you can see it adding value.
Well, again, it's great for executing low level things. So any type of lookup information, I just my phone service, I switched two phones on the account. I switched mine already to a new provider, and all of a sudden, I'm still being charged for a phone that they sent me. It says cancellation. So why am I being billed? So now I had to phone in because to go through the
Mm.
website is probably end in nothing, and took forever on the phone. I had to fight their IVR to get to a human. And when I finally talked to the person, oh yeah, you shouldn't have been billed. So I'll save my opinions as to why those things happen. But if they had a useful assistant, first of all, it should never have happened. But even if it did, it can look the stuff up and see, oh, there's a cancellation. It should not be billed. I'll credit you instantly, and I'm sorry, or remedy they want to offer on top of that. There was no need to have, and it's an offshore, I'm in the US, it's an offshore call center. There's no need for that. I've always said have less but better skilled, better people to escalate to, and let the system handle this first line. When I was at the bank, that's what we were always told by my boss, and it was the right approach because these simple things. Yet, what do we need to involve humans? Of course, the bank wanted to save money. The idea I'm talking about is the efficiency. I was on the phone a very long time to get a little credit back. That's no fun. So it's all these first line of defense type of or interaction, I shouldn't say defense necessarily, but the first line of interaction type of uh, customer service, customer experience. Can you send me this? Can you answer this? How do you do? All those type of questions. There are standard answers to, or a level of lookup. As I said, I needed this credit because they're charging me for a phone they don't service. Any of those
Hmm.
type things really can be serviced there. There's the other phone that's still being serviced by that provider is not receiving phone call. So I would get nowhere at this stage talking to an AI system to resolve that. So far, we've gotten nowhere talking to the humans. Uh, there's a better chance again of skilled humans taking those things on. So for me, and so I'm not a digital native. When I was a kid, this stuff did not exist. I'm able to desire and want to have this thing where, yeah, I don't want to have to talk to a person about this stuff. The conversation we're having, this is a great human to human conversation. When I need my phone service, my personal thinking for me, I don't need to talk to a person. Give me the credit, get the phone working, and that's it. I'm not talking to these companies because I'm looking for a friend. I'm talking to these companies because there's either information I need or a problem I need solved. And for me, I'm probably more digital natives. Let me talk to a system that's capable. And that to me is the big use of customer service in that way. And when there is a need, I want to talk to a very knowledgeable human, a great, uh, friendly conversation, and let them understand and use their skill. So, so really, it's in all these. Again, it's this first level, maybe even second level nowadays interactions that you can drastically improve the experience. The credit should have taken me 15 to 20 seconds with an automated system if it had to be done.
Yeah.
I'd have been able to do a quick lookup, go, oh, I'm sorry, here's a credit, and thing. Hope you'll consider coming back to us or whatever they want to
Yeah.
try and sell.
So Ken, this will require, I mean, different skills for us, right? Because we will need to shift a little bit, the areas that we become expert at, and I think we need to become more expert at dealing with AI, and then us focusing on, let's say, maybe innovation more, right?
So much of this, I think, is just basic logic. I think most most UX people are people that experience frustration when they look at a product. Often, I mean, I say there's no UX I can't improve. I'm always willing to be challenged on that. I can go to Amazon and point out dozens of things wrong with that website. They make a few dollars though, even with their problem. You know, uh, it's just looking at the logic. I find things like experience is going good, good, and then there's just something stupid that comes along. So it's not a technology issue. That's this product thing I talk about. So yeah, there's some innovation, but it's product management and UX. It's not separating these things. And often when these things are too separate, something falls through the cracks. And the other thing I say, just to go back to your earlier question about what a product manager is, when
Hmm.
the product succeeds, and this is my philosophy, when the product succeeds, the team succeeds. When the product fails, the product manager fails because they are the ones that have to look at this and they have to make the decisions and say, this is right, this is wrong, go back and do this better. We need to change this. We need better technology here. So it's not necessarily a technology solution. It's really following things through all the way to the end. I had an example, I can't think of it. It keeps occurring and I can't think of it. It's like one thing that falls down and ruins the experience every time I deal with it. Not sure at the moment, but so yeah, we have to change and think of how to use these technologies. But if you don't have the underlying thinking of the experience right, no technology is really going to fix it. Probably going to make it worse. So again, because companies are looking at this stuff to how can we save money? How can we get rid of people and automate this?
Right.
If you have a bad experience automating it, a bad experience probably makes it worse. So I think it's like learning a sport. The coach will always train you learn the basics or learning to sing. Great singers are trained on classical techniques, even though they don't sing classical music or play instruments for classical music. You got to get those basics right. technology or become great enhancements. But if you don't look at the underlying standard processes and outcomes, I think technology is just more trouble.
That great insight also, Ken, as well, I would say. And I like the way you related this again to UX and to the product management job. Um, Now I have a traditional question that I introduced recently to the show before we
Mhm.
close. Is there anything that you wish that I asked you, or any idea you want to share with us before we close?
I'm thinking about how to answer that.
Sorry.
That's okay. I think the last thing we talked on. So again, I'm into technology. I've been pushing this stuff for a long time. I love it. Not everyone loves it. There's definitely risks. Again, the AI, I don't believe is the risk. It's the human manipulation of it is an absolute risk, but that has not turned me off to it. We have to do better with what humans do. So I'm all for that. But I think, again, it becomes a band aid if it's not built on this foundation, just proper product thinking or product user experience. Again, I don't really separate those two as I gave you my little rundown of my background. It's been a mix. It was my last accountant. Went to college, worked somewhere, started, got into business. Everything he's ever done, he's been an accountant. Very
Yeah.
straight. They do not have a straight path. Been on all sides of this stuff. And I think it's just getting the basics of all these pieces together is what makes something really great. And everyone wants to experience great. Everyone wants to provide great. And as I said, do that and the money comes. So just the, not exactly the answer to your question, but I'll leave the last thing to emphasize, focus on getting all those basics right. And then the technology can be this great next step, great enhancement. Again, if you think of it, Chat GPT, if it has a bad corpus of data, it cannot write
Mhm.
well. It has to have something to learn from to write. And it's a great writing. It writes well, for sure. But if it had 4 sentences that it was trained on, it would never be able to write. So it got the underlying piece, at least for the writing part, done very well. And then it does amazing things.
Yeah, great. Just to add on this point, Ken. So the best way I try to explain to people, about how these large language models work. So I say, like, think about it. We didn't have, old philosophers start to write books. And then, there were like some dark ages where some other parts in the world where people, scientists and so on, they start to write books. And then someone translated these books. And then, the Renaissance happened in Europe. And then based on that previous knowledge, they continued. So the same way I say, ChatGPT or any, like AI powered chatbot or something that can generate content, whether it's written, audio, or video, it's not a magic box. It's not like, you know, the guy coming from the Hobbit, or I don't know which other fantasy movie that just, does this and, oh, hey, here we go. We have a very fancy avatar that came up. It's not like it created this avatar. It used some previous created art that allowed it to reshape it in a new form. And same thing for the text. It's not like a magic box that write text. Of course, people have dreamed about it for a long time, but this is what AI is all about. I like to call it more. I don't know, like artificial. I say AI and I cover AI, but I'm still, the word intelligence for me, it means something else. So it's like more automation. I don't know maybe this is for another
Mm.
discussion for another episode, but like it doesn't have the capability to do what human do well, which is reasoning. Cannot do think by itself what to do next. You need to do it. And it does this using data that we feed it. So 100% agree with you, Ken, on this. Um, Anything you want to say before we close, Ken?
I'm sure we can go on for hours about these things. I mean, one little point I'll throw in there. When we use the term AI, I mean, it's such a broad term. It really has
Right.
no meaning. It's like if I told you I went to this fabulous restaurant last night, Mehmet, you got to try it. And you say, oh, what'd you have? Food. So AI is like the word food. I mean, it's not descriptive. There's so many areas to it. So kind of dislike the term. Yeah, it's overused and meaningless, but yeah, there's a lot to break down. But yeah, I'm sure we could go on and focus on different areas. I appreciate you having me as a guest. You have a great show. I
Thank you.
enjoy catching it whenever I can. You turn out a lot and it's all good information. So thank you for having me and getting a chance to meet your audience.
Thank you very much, Ken. I'm actually like honored to have this feedback from you and
Thank you.
to have you on the show today. Um, just on this point, what I'm trying to do is again add knowledge, separate the noise from the facts as much as I can, of course. I'm not a mainstream media, unfortunately. Like I'm
Mhm.
just doing this by myself. So thank you very much for this feedback. And at the end, thank you for everyone who tuned in today. If you are listening for the first time, please don't forget to subscribe on whatever podcasting platform you're listening from. And um, also, if you have any questions, if you have any feedback about this episode or the show in general, please don't hesitate to reach out to me directly. I can be reached out by email. You can find me on LinkedIn and Twitter. This is usually where I hang on. And also, if you are interested to be like Ken, a guest on the show, I would love to discuss this with you because anything that we can together add, I'm very happy to do it. And as usual, don't forget also to recommend us to your friends, family, and colleagues. And I would be waiting for your feedback on the show. Thank you very much for tuning in today. And until we meet in the next episode, thank you.